Please check out our sponsors NordVPN for the best in online security. It's the best VPN on the market, and you can try it risk-free now with a 30-day money-back guarantee by visiting nordvpn.com/heartandhand. That's nordvpn.com/heartandhand, and it's risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Hello everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name is David Edgar, and as always, I am your host, and I'm delighted this week to be joined by two stalwart podders of Heart and Hand. First of all, the absolutely fantastic Mr. Alan Bradley is here.
What an introduction, David. My first time this season. Everything's going to be fine going forward. Take a note of that, mate, yeah? Good to be on.
Do my best. And all the way from New York, such a gad-about town these days. He's all over the world, total jet setter. It's Mr. David Graham. Hello, Davey.
Yes, good afternoon, Davey. Good afternoon, Alan. And big shout out to the Big Apple Bears for their hospitality and welcome yesterday. Obviously, we had to endure the game for 2 hours, but we'll get into that and discuss it in good detail, I'm sure.
Yeah, the city that never sleeps, but might have done had it watched that game yesterday, Alan. I watched that match back, as I do, and I counted like 5 incidents in it, which is not what you expect out of an Old Firm game. The quality might not always be so high, but the usually incident packed. That was not the case on this occasion. Two sides, of course, coming off very bad results. In the case of Celtic, going out to the very, very, very lowly ranked Kazakhstan side, Kairat Almaty, failing to score against them in 210 minutes, going out on penalties. Rangers then went hold my beer and a pathetic, spineless performance in Belgium against Bruges, where to me it just looked like several of them chucked it. Rangers losing that game 6-0. I did wonder, Alan, at some point yesterday if they could have saved us all a journey because they looked like two teams that might have shaken hands on that one, a 0-0 in the tunnel before it started.
I would agree. And coming at the supporters whisker into the ground, David, the old Genesis guy, I was worried that it would be thrown it all away. I didn't want to turn it again after I'd seen it. And I'm just in a land of confusion, mate. I mean, just say a handful of chances.
Is there a Genesis song called Fuck Up, You Old Bastard, and talk about the football?
see, to be honest with you, the football was that bad, David. You'd probably even like some of the stuff, punk guy.
I was going to say, actually, I would maybe have preferred to sit and listen to Genesis yesterday. But, yeah, I mean, look, from a Rangers point of view, and that's what we're interested in,
yeah,
Rangers were better. Certainly the manager who we have accused on here, I think correctly, of not changing. The suicidal high line was gone. Rangers had, I thought, a more recognisable 4-2-3-1 formation. We're going long more than we a lot more than we have done in previous games. The effort was there, Davey. They worked a lot harder, but I'm not giving them any credit for that because I kind of expect that as a basic. But couldn't really convert. I thought Rangers were the better side. I think common consent reading the papers today, most people would agree with me, but without really ever threatening to turn that into a massive advantage. And to me, it looked like two teams that right, we are not losing. We'll try and win, and that would be great, but we are not losing this game.
Yeah, it felt to me it was the most sterile Old Firm. In fact, and listen, I had the privilege of attending Old Firms, as did you, Davey, during COVID, when there was literally a handful of people in the stadium.
Aye, okay, you two rub it in. That's it, just you two carry on.
And I think, yes, in the grand scale of things, even those games were feisty, if that makes sense, even without the crowd. I mean, yesterday was the most sterile Old Firm, certainly, I've ever watched in my lifetime. I think it almost felt a bit like, I don't know, Brentford playing Bournemouth on like the last day of the season where they were like 11th and 12th, so they could neither go up nor down. It just felt like a game that passed everyone by. And I think, yes, Russell Martin changed it, but I think we had a chat in the group during the game or just swiftly after it, which basically said, every time we looked like we were going to go back or close to essentially his system, we began to look a bit exposed and a bit vulnerable. And essentially, we drew that game yesterday by playing the furthest thing from Russell Martin's standard and identity of play. And I think, look, we can discuss it in more detail, but yesterday in many ways epitomised really a lot of what's wrong with us as a team, as a unit at the moment, because there was no sense of bravery, no sense of ambition, playing with a fear, which I think only for the fact, and you're right. Look, I don't want to say from their point of view, but if you're looking at it through Brendan Rodgers' glasses come full time yesterday, you're saying, well, we're 6 points ahead, plus with a +6 goal difference, Rangers of 0. We'd have taken this at the start of the season. We're happy to go into the international break. Listen, they've huge problems when it comes to Europe and everything else, and that's fine. But right here, right now, it's been a fairly impotent start to the season, epitomised by how we performed yesterday. And I think, and I don't want to sound like the sort of archetypal Rangers dad at this point, but Miovski, I think, was one of our better players yesterday, and he commanded really well. He put a tweet out yesterday saying, +1, move on. I think, again, I don't want to get into sort of, the ins and outs of it, but, anyone that leaves that ground yesterday thinking it's acceptable to draw against them, particularly in that fashion and manner, I think we just have to remember the standards that we've got as a football club. So look, it's a far cry from what we felt in midweek, Davey, but it's a far cry from what we expect as Rangers fans.
Yeah, I think he's spot on there, Alan. I think that it was better than an absolute embarrassing disaster, right? Okay,
yeah.
So, that yes, but the bar was incredibly low. I do accept that you probably don't go from that sort of humiliation to a superb performance 3 days later. Football life doesn't work like that. And Rangers did very much, I think, go back to basics. A more combative midfield where I thought Barron and Diamandi actually did very well and would not allow the Celtic midfield time on the ball to start playing. And, defensively, I thought Rangers were far more... There were a few times where Giga just dealt with things. There's still communication issues between him and Butland, that's clear. But at least he didn't wait this time, as we saw against Bruges. He would just deal with the situation and worry about it later, which is what I want in a centre-back. So I'm not going to criticise him too much for that. But impotent is a word Dave used. And going forward, we really were. We didn't get much going at all. Although I do think that Miovski led the line well. He looks... Well, look, we'd all seen him before, right? I'll be honest, I was a big fan of Bojan Miovski. I remember on these shows talking to you lads and saying, God, I'd love to sign him. But, at the time, Aberdeen were looking for $6.5 million. They ended up getting it, and it would have been more to us, most likely. To pick him up for $2.6 million, I think is just a really sensible bit of business. And you see what he offers in terms of his all-round game yesterday, causing problems, getting in behind. Good work rate, holds the ball up. What we need to do, of course, is start making them chances.
Yeah, I think if we were actually buying him from Aberdeen, where did they go for about 6.8 or something? It'd have been even more, David,
at the
time.
Right.
But I think, right, here we go, guys, controversial. See all this philosophy push, right, that we've had over the past 2 months. What happened was, I've just got a feeling, and I think a lot of fans have got a feeling of this whole, the attitude, the arrogance, people talk about it, is a bit kind of Joey Barton-y. I'll just come up to Scotland, we'll do this, it'll all be absolutely fine, we'll just rip it up, we'll do this and we'll play. We won't tweak anything, we'll just keep doing it. What he did yesterday was obviously, he's put himself away down into a corner where, to be honest with you, it's not even a couple of sugarly nails, but, depending on what happens in the next few games, we'll go on to the owners. But what he should have done, David, early on, even after game 2 or game 3, put his hands up and went, oh, this is a wee bit more difficult than I had actually thought. You can't actually go from a whole lot out, a whole lot in, change the style. We're going to do it in a kind of transitional way. We're losing too many goals. People are shooting 20-odd times against us. I'm going to stop the bleeding just now. And then through time, we will then start getting to the complete thing, But I think what he's done is he kept on doing that, keep doing the same. It's okay for people to be brave. And what he's done is he's actually put himself into a position that their confidence in everything was so bad. During the week, obviously, that's really... And what he's had to do then was... It was almost like the kind of Walter taking over. I'm just going to stop the bleeding. I'll get Ugo Egeog, I'll put Davy Weir and stop the... So he actually did it obviously yesterday, and then he's so scared that if things had went so wrong, and he knows about these protesting things, so that stopped his going middle to front, But I think really I think he's caused a lot of it. And to be perfectly honest with you, going into the game as well, I was like, God, I hope it's not going to be 2-0 at half time and people are all going to go out. It's just a case of, right, we don't want to get beat to start with, but I take what you and Big Davey say as well. When you've got them, and we had them on the ropes in a number of periods during that game, we should have been pressing more and we should have been going for but again, I think they were all frightened into, well, you better not do, everything was all, let's not lose anything. So, bit of a rant, but I think...
No, it felt like that.
But we
yesterday, there's not getting away from it.
I know, just kind of my last one, but overall, with me coming out, I was coming out thinking, shit, if we had just gone 1-0, and then we'd have been sitting 3 points, maybe the guy has learned a wee bit, but I've not seen, that's just one wee thing. But the guy needs to learn this, because see if he doesn't get back to, we need to stop the bleeding, we don't want people getting chances, and obviously we've got to improve it. He's going to be toast anyway, Davey, But there was Connor Barron, you said good. I think Miovski too. I think even the wee left back, he was actually doing no bad. Diamonde,
I thought he was good, Magoma.
And I thought Diamonde came on to the amount of ground he covered and so on as well. So there were some positives, but we'll see what happens with the new signings and kind of move on, David. Yeah.
Davey, wee bit surprised. I mean, I know, you were there and know that this sort of thing goes on. Wee bit surprised Celtic didn't try and hijack the deal for Miovski, because they had a long-term interest in him. I must admit, given their travails, not that we cared, but I was a wee bit surprised they didn't, or maybe they didn't. We just don't know about it.
Yeah, I think it's actually interesting that, and it probably yesterday the 90 minutes epitomised that they in many ways are equally as bad as we are, both on and off the park at the moment. And I think that you're right. I am surprised that they didn't try to do the classic. Maybe after get their fingers burnt in Scott Allen, maybe they've learned their lesson in that. But no, I think that there's no doubt Miovski gives us what we sort of thought Dessers was going to give us when we first signed him, and he maybe just hasn't, or he didn't quite transpire out like that. I mean, I think. One other point that I would make on going back to some of the good points Alan's made there is, if we play like we did yesterday in our next 2 games, which are obviously both Edinburgh clubs and obviously in 2 different competitions, where I don't see us winning either of those, to be quite honest.
No, if you play like that, you'll get a 0-0. You can't totally focus. I accept that they probably will keep them at bay, but you can't focus on that. Look, let's not beat around the bush here. 4 draws is unacceptable for Rangers at any point in our history. Starting no league wins in the opening 4 is piss poor, and we can't get away from that. We can look at the game in isolation yesterday and the circumstances of it, but it has been very bad, and the atmosphere around the club is very bad, because it's almost become a cliche, but it's become a cliche because it's true. And Alan, I'll stick with you on this one. We've played well for 60 minutes of one game against Pilsen. We were 3-0 up and we coasted the last half hour. Fair enough. So one game, right, I'll say, we've played well, where it was enjoyable and we were flowing and attacking. The rest of the time, Rangers attack. And I asked the manager this yesterday. I said, look, this is 4 league games. We've scored 3 goals in that time. One of which was a penalty, one of which was a set piece, a corner, one of which was when the ball was cleared for a corner, Curtis smashing one in. I don't think we're making a high quality of chances. And he said, well, we actually make a lot of chances and it'll get better. We've got more quality in. But so far, this Rangers team has not looked like a side that is going to create the number of chances that you need to win matches. And I get yesterday it was probably coming off a 6-0 where, God, it was 6 going on 10. If they'd wanted 10, they could have got it. The priority was probably, right, keep a clean sheet and we'll see what happens. And I get that, but it's not like it was suddenly a problem. This has been a problem all season.
Yeah, and I think typically throughout the decades, Rangers weren't the greatest starters. But, well, with this one, at least in the early games, David, if it was we were playing some really good football with loads of chances and so on. But as you say, there's been, apart from that, 50 minutes or whatever it would be, there's been next to no evidence. And you know me as well. I hate this. Every 18 months it becomes rip it up and start again. Players are surplus, So I did think we need to do something to kind of break the cycle and so on. But we've got to be seeing some. We've not seen any improvement. If anything, teams have just been walking through us, and it's not even just Europe. Allo as well, and so there's so much, as I say, that he needed to do. I think more in the basics. And I think that's what's kind of scunning everybody. And also because he didn't put his hands up and go, listen, this is a wee bit harder than I thought. I'm going to have to compromise a wee bit to start with. I think a lot of us would have went, aye, okay, we'll give him a bit. But it was just this kind of, nah, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. And it was like the same old Clement and the other ones telling us stuff, Davy, that our eyes can see. And what would happen is it'd be 60 minutes of a game where it would be rubbish. And then you go, yeah, but the last 30 minutes we were fantastic, or So, but as I say, I just think he put himself into that corner. I do think, depending what we get, obviously Simon will go through, and depending what the signings are, potentially we might be a wee bit more, kind of middle to front, and we may improve it. But the other one too is we're going to have to just improve. I think all over, and as it is sticking in my throat now that we couldn't have actually, and we should have taken something from Celtic yesterday.
Well, we did, but we should have taken the
but
3 points. I know what you
should
mean.
have done
They're not a great side either, but Rangers have been a mess so far this season. And I don't think that's too strong a word. I think Rangers have been a mess so far this season. Davey, so the game itself was not much to write home about, will not live long in the memory. Probably the thing going into it was the fan reaction, and there were a few banners and some chants for Nico Raskin. We're hearing today that Nico Raskin is going to stay, and you'd imagine therefore that basically they'll need to come to some understanding. In terms of the backing that the manager spoke about, now I've spoken to people who were there with Andrew Kavanagh. They're all saying the same thing, and they're all agreeing with the manager's assessment, or the head coach's assessment of that meeting. Kavanagh was very clear on it, that we believe that this is the right way, that Russell's going to be the guy and turn it round. So anyone sitting hoping that he gets sacked during this international window, it's not going to happen. No. I mean, I think that's absolutely clear. No matter what you, I, or Alan think, right? He is there, and they believe in him, and they're gonna back him. But the results have got to improve quickly, because there surely comes a point for anyone, right? We've got Hearts and Hibs at home in the 2 games after we come back. We need to win both of those to have any chance of it. Otherwise, at that point, it's just like, guys, you're deluded.
Yeah, well, I think the challenge I think we've got now as a fan base is we've gone, and we've all said this before, we've gone from being ran by Rangers fans, genuinely really good people who were really successful in their own businesses, who are Rangers fans. So whether you like it or not, there's always going to be a tinge of emotion because you're a supporter. So whether you're a really wealthy supporter or whatever, you're going to be slightly different and nuanced in your, less maybe nuanced in your outlook than someone like Andrew Kavanagh, who's come across. And he's bought Rangers, and you can give us all the sell about what a big club we are and everything else. But fundamentally, he's looking at this cold-hearted business. And I think that there's a little bit of a narrative coming in, perhaps because he's American as well. If the Glazers are being mentioned, where it's all about this is purely down to business and everything else. I don't believe that people involved in San Francisco 49ers, people involved in Leeds, and now involved in us, don't see the benefits of being involved in a large institution like us. So that they're naturally winners, and it's not just all down to dollars and cents in their case. Where I think the challenge becomes on that, though, is you're going to stick with Russell Martin. That's fine. They've communicated to the staff, and they've clearly briefed and leaked, etc. in a way, so that's okay. It's a stay of execution in my view. Where the real challenge comes for them is, what about when it comes to selling our Europa League package, where, if we're bluntly honest, Roma's the only kind of real glamour tie within that. What happens if we lose to Hibs, as an example, where we're out of the League Cup, so we don't have that sort of pre-Christmas final to keep sort of life and ourselves and one thing or another. And I think the real difficulty is there's a danger in the new owners losing credibility if they say, we support him, we support him, we support him. And a little bit probably like happened with Gio, where the general sense was that, Gio was going to be okay throughout the I think it was an international break or the World Cup break perhaps. And then next thing he was sacked. And I think that this is the challenge where now, if results don't improve, then he can't stay. Well, whatever way you look at it, we must start winning football games and winning them really well very soon.
You'll end up with 30-odd thousand tickets sold for European. They need to do, surely you said businessmen and professionals and so on, they must have succession planning. They must be sitting there with okay, we're going to back Martin and we'll see how far it goes. But surely, to goodness, Thelwell had questions about all of that too, but they must have something sitting there, because at some point, as David says, if we go a run of 2, 3, whatever games, and we've lost them, they're going to have to actually say, like other businesses, okay, sometimes with projects you fail fast and you just go stop that and you do something else. It's...
Yeah, look, you cannot in perpetuity be getting bad results and bad football, because that's what we've witnessed to this point. You can't even say, well, there's been great attacking play, but we're bad at the back. It hasn't happened so far at all. And I think they'll be glad to get to the international break, and they'll be glad to have the reset now. Mm-hmm. And, the squad has been radically changed. We can debate about the quality of it. The next big signing appears to be now, folks, we do apologise because we're recording this on transfer deadline day, so things can always change. But the big investment seems to be Youssef Chermiti from Everton. And Davey, I made this point about Chermiti. People are saying, I can't believe it's 8 million for a guy that couldn't get in the Everton team. Well, I can, because they paid 15 million for him. And that's how much people from down there cost. Now, the question to me isn't a case of, is he worth that or not? The question to me is, are we shopping in the right market? And you might recall this a couple of years, 5 years ago now, I think. I asked you when you worked at Rangers, the important questions of the day. I was like, do you know what kind of jacket that is that Steven Gerrard has? And you told me it was by an Italian company called Lolo Piani. And I went and had a look at that jacket, and it was £20,675. Right? And I always loved it, the 675, as if 20 grand wasn't enough. 20,600.
You only bought two of them, Davey, yeah?
Right. On the website,
Don't tell Sally. No,
I bought a hat, right? Because I could afford the hat. I couldn't afford the jacket. But that left me in the position of still needing the jacket, right? Yeah. So it's about where you shop, right? And my view is that you don't get value for money in England because the market in there is insane.
Look what they spent on Nathan Patterson, David. Do you know what I mean?
Look, we're seeing today even things like, Chelsea have loaned Nicholas Jackson for 16 million. That's right. For a loan for 1 year. Yeah. 16 million. Yeah. And there's boys you've never heard of being moved about. Fulham have bought a Chelsea reserve who's played like 8 games for Chelsea, 22 million. It's a wild market. However, the counterpoint to that is, and I think it's pretty clear that fans, are, what the hell is going on here with this boy? The counterpoint you would say is, well, this, I think, Davey, is going to be the transfer that defines Kevin Thelwell and Dan Purdy, because it's our second highest spend ever, right? It's clearly the money that we got for Iggerman. So this is going to be the one that defines them. Now, they obviously believe in this boy, and I'm kind of clinging to that because there's nothing in his stats to say that he's going to be a sensation. But if he doesn't work, and I'm not going to be one of the guys that's sitting there going, he's going to be pish, I'm saying it now. I don't know. I haven't seen enough of him. And if he comes here, I'm going to get behind him, especially at that money. We have to make it work. But this is one that you're putting your head in the chopping block with,
I think the irony of it is, I think yourself, you and I, and our good friend Mark Dingwall had a quick chat about this, I think last night or the night before, where our fans have gone from, why are we not spending any money? Why are we not competing? Why are we not signing quality from the Premiership? We're now going to sign someone from the Premiership at the second biggest transfer fee we've ever spent. And I think now a lot of our fans are almost, flip-flopping and saying, "Oh, hold on a second, how are we affording this? Are you sure this isn't too much money?" So, look, it shows the challenge of trying to keep football fans happy because it's an impossible task. And we're probably still scarred from Tor Andre Flo to an extent as well, given the fee that was, I suppose, paid for him. And I don't think, if we're honest, anyone can say that he made the impact and was worth that money.
12 million.
What I think is probably, and they're probably unlucky in that Kevin Thelwell and Dan Purdy have came from Everton. It feels, and I don't think it's the case, but it feels that they have either had this rabbit to pull out of the hat, okay? So it almost reminds me of, the Aaron Ramsey at the very end of the transfer window where everyone was like, aha, that's what we've been waiting for. Or it feels like the rabbit has been pulled out of the hat because, well, they kind of knew him. They maybe knew he was hanging around and Everton would offload him for, in Everton's terms, very cheap money. So ultimately the proof is going to be in the pudding. And I think you're right. No, Kevin Thelwell, I think, has been given a bit more breathing space because the window's been open. I think because Russell Martin has been bluntly such a disappointment, it's probably taken away the focus from our recruitment as such, although, Ali was absolutely scathing about it after the Bruges game. And I think, and absolutely, but I think when, to quote Jim White, the transfer window slams shut, or Kevin Thelwell's going to have to hope that the recruitment starts to play out and start getting runners results, because the danger here is if Andrew Cavan has basically said the manager's not going anywhere, that's going to move the focus somewhere else. So, for me, we got to back this kid because we've got to make it worth our money. But as you say, we're all viewing it with a healthy degree of skepticism, I think is the most balanced way of putting it.
Yeah, I just think that we've got to get better at scouting other markets where there might be more value. You need to look into places where, you're going to get people on the way up. Because, a gentleman actually said to me at the game yesterday, he said, "Davey, when are we going to sign somebody that I've heard of that's a finished article?" And I had to be honest, I said, never. And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "We're never going to do that again." I said, "Because the finished article costs you minimum 50, 60 million. It doesn't happen anymore." So, it's not we need to sign potential. I'm just not sure, Alan, that's a market we should be in, because I think we're walking about, we don't have much money in our pocket, and we're walking about a place in the EPL where, nothing's cheap.
David, for the past wee while, I know that Big Davy says about Rangers Da and so on, but I still feel that if you look at domestically how we're struggling, and that's the bread and butter. I know the finance for Europe, but we need to be doing better domestically. And I feel that by having to go to places like St Mirren or Fir Park or whoever it would be, and people just battering some of our so-called the potential guys, I still feel we should have been sprinkling 3 or 4 tried and tested people that have played in the SPL. I know everybody looks down their nose at them, and I think potentially for, say, 11 million quid, you maybe actually get 2 or 3 that have been to Parkhead and don't crumble. And and when they would go to some of these other grounds, if it came to, let's do the first 15 minutes of battle, could stand up to it. No. Do you know what I mean? I feel that we've lacked some of the guys that have been signed. Well, we turned our nose up at Ferguson and all that for Aberdeen, didn't we? But you've seen some of these guys that then go on the continent. And I know it's a totally different game, but I would rather we could sprinkle 2 or 3 Scottish people. Do you know what I mean? Even some of the ones that we've played against in those teams. And I think we might get more value, because ultimately I just want us to do better than Celtic and do better than the rest of them. And then if we start doing better domestically, we're maybe we're pushing for the league, winning a league, a cup, then you can maybe start sprinkling a wee bit more of but it's a bit like the revolution, the kind of stuff that we did, before with Souness and so on. You end up trying to do both. And the way I feel just now, I'm just like, try and get a wee run into Europe, but just blink and start winning domestically. And Rangers fans too. I don't mind going back home for St Mirren away and Margaret saying, well, that didn't look great. I don't care. 3 points, But sorry, Rangers stepping back, but yeah.
That's why I really like the Miovski signing, because I'm like, here was a guy. Firstly, at the fee, I think it's an absolute no-brainer.
Oh, beauty,
right?
Absolutely, yeah.
I've got a guy who I've seen play in Scotland. I've seen ragdoll in the defenders you're talking about, who's gone to these places, and I'm thinking, yeah, that's exactly what we need. And I think just like a lot of Rangers fans, I'm kind of a bit wary of bringing in kids from the academies down south or whatever.
See, even the big boy Mark O'Hara, I know everyone will laugh. Mark O'Hara plays against us all the time. He was at Motherwell at St Mirren, and he just, do you know what I mean? He always manages to, win a lot of stuff.
I don't think he would be. I don't think he would be a cultural fit for us.
No, well, sorry. Obviously, I couldn't possibly. But you get
as
what
Mark
I mean.
Ramsey puts it very delicately. I think he may prefer a move to the other side of the city. But no, I know what you mean. That's why I don't mind Lyle Cameron. Will Lyle Cameron be a world beater? Probably not. But I think he'll do a job for us. You saw yesterday Barron got stuck in to the middle of the park.
And if we can win it for Park and all these places with those guys, knock yourself out. Do you know?
And then you augment it with the talent, Davey. Yep. Walter had a side that had quite a lot of what you might class as journeymen, but he had up front, he had Jelavic. There's your bit of class.
Right. I think that's probably a frustration. In fact, I think, Davey, I said this to you only a few weeks ago on the pod, where when we see people like Kirk Broadfoot, people like Stephen Whittaker, Lee McCullough, these guys who are bluntly average to decent Scottish footballers who go on to win league medals with us, get us to the UEFA Cup final. Like fundamentally, they were in a team where they did exactly what was asked of them. But you've got to bear in mind, you had someone with quality like Carlos Queller at centre half. You had Stephen Davis, who, and I want to touch on Asgard in a second. Stephen Davis, who was a Rolls Royce, who, to quote the national anthem for Scotland, will never see his lights again. And sorry, I'm veering into being biased here, but anyways, you can understand.
That's not my national anthem, Davey, but carry on.
Davey's got it in his heart-hand contract that he gets to talk about Stephen Davis in every podcast.
And then I think that, as you say, you've got the like a Jelavic up front who give us sort of that big quality. And I think probably that's where, and again, this is we talk about standards, driving standards. We need to be really careful here that we don't accept a certain level that becomes the norm. And what I mean by that is where we're bringing decent footballers in, some like Joe Rothwell, who has been promoted twice, I think, actually. So clearly, he is not a bad footballer.
Yeah.
But we just need to be really careful here that we are bringing a certain degree of, you got to win at all costs at this club, and you got to get down, you got to get dirty, and you're right on where you got to go to Fir Park, you got to go to.
You need a mix.
100%, and that's where I think we probably struggled after 55 to really keep our throat on them, but on the whole league, because we began, I think we still had a bit of a soft underbelly where, if you recall, we dropped points to Ross County away in January, games where, you have to try to grind it out and you have to win. And I think that the point remains here is that, if you take Theo Asgard's performance yesterday, I think he neutralised Callum McGregor the way that, like, if Joe Aribo,
the way Berchami had done it before,
or Stephen Davis would have neutralised Scott Brown, for example. But they did that whilst then, when they had the ball, being able to play us forward and drive us into areas. Whilst, with respect, when Asgard had the ball yesterday, I felt impotence, maybe just the word I'm going to continue to use, but it just felt that there was no real kind of desire or bravery to break the lines and really play us forward,
And again, that's maybe a confidence thing as well, given, what they were coming off in midweek. And like I say, I think it was a safety first one. Now, the Nico Raskin situation, quite clearly a fallout with the manager. Not at the game yesterday, told not to be at the game yesterday, not in the squad, even though fit. Neil McCann, I thought, spoke quite illuminatingly about him, says, he's a difficult character. He does question everything, and you need to persuade him to do stuff, but he's a good lad and a good player. And I always think in these circumstances, Alan, the clues in the title, manage that. You'll get people who are like that, who are difficult characters. I think, though, that it can become a binary situation where people just, right, who's the goodie and who's the baddie, and they don't like Russell Martin. And look, the vast majority of Rangers fans fundamentally, I think we can say this accurately, do not like Russell Martin. So they're, Nico is totally right. Whereas the truth is probably in the middle.
It'll be in between.
Yeah, there's probably flaws on both sides on this. But for the good of the club, you need to get both of them together and work out what's best. Raskin clearly doesn't want to go. I think we can say that, comfortably. He's not going to go. So, we can't have an asset sitting doing nothing for the next 6 months. So we need to find a way to get him back in the team. And if you get him in and playing well, we're a better team with him in it.
Yeah, I mean, but we're going back to the old, it's terrible. My reference point's always what would Walter have done with it? And he totally, he would have handled it so differently, wouldn't he? I think that whole, and he's not, I think everyone says Russell Martin a nice guy and so on, whoop he do, but the kind of whole arrogance thing, it's as if he's away at one side of it. And you do hear other people, I think even wee Billy Dodds said something like he's really strong-minded, Raskin and so on. But somebody somewhere, whether it even becomes Kevin Thelwell then, the kind of line manager, what the hell's going on here? This guy potentially is something that we could flip in a couple of years' time as a good footballer. For God's sake, Russell. But someone should be trying to, now hopefully they've maybe kind of found that way, David, through it. So faults on both sides of it, but my goodness. And I do think we'll be a far better team with Raskin in it, there's no doubt. Although saying that, the last 6 months he was phenomenal last season. Previous to that, so let's not suddenly make out he's like Graham Souness or he's this world class, But I mean, I'd love the wee man in there. And what I like about him too is against Celtic and so on, you can tell the certain players that they've really got to. That's what we want, don't we? Yeah.
No, 100%. Yeah, and obviously
he's a leader as well. Although I know off the park he's probably not shown that, but I think he's one of those guys on the park.
He cares. He cares, and it is how you express it. But he's a young guy, and he cares. And what I would say is that we're obviously Heart and Hand, we sponsor him, so we're a bit biased. I'm aware of that. But Davey, from a PR point of view, I don't think this has been handled well at all. This has played out in a way that, in my opinion, it didn't need to play out. And again, I have a wee bit of sympathy here for Russell Martin because we heard a lot, Clement was left out there to twist in the wind, and that won't happen now. He'll get back in from, and we haven't heard from Thelwell, we haven't heard from Stewart, who could have been setting things and controlling the agenda a wee bit more than they've done. And in the case of Nico Raskin, I don't think Martin helped himself. He's been very evasive around it. There was a chance on Friday to say he's not going to be in the squad, and you can say it's a disciplinary matter or a disagreement or whatever, and we need to focus on the game, we'll sort it out on Monday. Instead, he was evasive, and it doesn't do him any good, I think. And I don't like the way it's been handled, and I don't think that, I think it's spiraled into something that didn't.
I know that myself and Adam and probably Andy to an extent were having a sort of back and forth on the WhatsApp group where Adam's point was, basically Adam's point was that basically Russell Martin got hammered for basically being honest around Egeman the week before to basically say, and
he was clearly honest because Egeman
yes,
was
absolutely.
And
the only thing I would say is where I firstly I disagreed with Adam. I said, look, he inferred, and I know that you and I said in the flagship, everybody then just thought, all right, he refused to come on, which, if we're honest, that seems to be the case. Whilst for me, if I'd been Russell Martin, I would have simply said, Hamza felt something in the warm-up but didn't want to take the risk. That was it. End of story. We move on. But because of his inference and because of his kind of, I suppose, trying to, put a line down without being explicit, he appeared to be weak. He appeared to be arrogant. And I think you're right. And this goes back to Adam's point. Some Rangers fans just simply don't want to hear what Russell Martin says because they don't like him. And that's a fact. And you've already said it yourself. Where I think he then went wrong on the Nico Raskin situation was because there's always a chance of something leaking. I mean, let's be honest, one of the main problems that we've got at Ibrox at the minute is there is just simply too much information coming out of the club. I mean, it seems to be social media, but a lot of what's being said seems to be to be accurate. And I think that one of the challenges that we then find is where Russell Martin had an opportunity on Friday to simply say, Nico's not going to be in the squad. There are some issues with Nico, but the door will remain open for him. And I hope that we can come to the resolution. So
Yeah.
you end it there and you say,
Yeah.
full focus is now on Sunday, the old firm. And I think the problem with it is that Russell Martin has spent the last couple of months since he's arrived being like half pregnant, if you know what I mean. So he hasn't committed to either side. So we've gone from after Fir Park coming out and basically pretty much calling out Tav and Raskin from memory, then dropping them, then having to bring them on to save a game. And I just feel that Alan's mentioned arrogance. He appears to be arrogant, and I think that he is not making he's making it easy for fans who don't want to like him, not like him, if that makes sense.
Davey, it's as
Uh,
if his default is I go into that position. I've worked with bosses, two bosses and so on, and they'll change, when they're put in, and it's as if that's his default. And I just feel at times, most of us, if you just go, and they're a wee bit more honest about it, I think you'll get more sort of support from them. But every time he does it, I'm like, for God's sake, could you just try and be?
Look,
Do you get what I mean? I just don't think he's.
Yeah.
But again, Thelwell should be blinking. My line manager would be saying to me, "What the hell are you doing, Alan?" And as you said, David, here's the type of things you need to. Let's look at how you're positioning
I think
yourself
the
and how you're
challenge
coming
we've got
across.
here, and I know,
And,
Davey, you and I have spoken about this offline, where, really a sporting director, director of football, technical director, whatever the title is, it's a very new thing, okay? And a lot of clubs have looked at it in different ways. So, the days of Sir Alex driving, 200 mile with Archie Knox to see
Running the
if it
whole
might
plot
fancy a
by.
wee left winger because someone mentioned it. Those days are gone, and for better or ill, the game has changed a lot. I suppose when directors of football were starting to become a thing, you had people like Edu, you had people like Edwin van der Sar, Patrick Vieira, I think, was he director of football Man City at the time? Was that right? Um, you know, I think so, yeah. And so you
Yeah,
had these
yeah, I
big
think so.
names who became sort of almost like statesmen to an extent. So there were club legends who essentially then, like I recall when I think we played Ajax, Edwin van der Sar come out and did the pre-match um, couple of minutes with Emma Dodds over their manager. So they're clearly like really public figures who are really well known, really well respected. I think our challenge is when, with respect, no one really knew who Kevin Thelwell was unless you had really intimate knowledge of Everton or sort of the wider kind of football directors cross. So his challenge is now where I think Rangers fans desire leadership. They desire the chest thumping. That's why the likes of Walter Smith, setting it even aside as success. Graham Soon is setting aside as success. Stephen Gerrard setting aside success. Yeah, people
even
who
an
spoke
advocate
with
or someone
authority,
like that,
people when they
yeah, yeah.
walked into a room, they had a presence. And I think that's where the vacuum gets created because Russell Martin is half filling it. And then I think that is actually then putting sort of unintended consequences where I think, and I think I don't know if I said this necessarily public, but we were saying privately where if this begins to kind of unravel further and further, I mean, Kevin Thelwell's face won't be the first face of a sporting director who ends up with a red line through his face in a stand. And that's where none of us want to be again because we were sort of hoping like, all those things were in the past. And we think that, I think bluntly, we have as a fan base, like, I think we've treated some of our sort of senior members of staff with a certain degree of, we've treated them unfairly, I think, at times. And I think that if we're going to fall into this cycle again of disliking the manager and then we need to find some of the blame, well, let's find Kevin Felwell. And I think really then the next one is probably moving on to Patrick Stewart then. They're saying, well, where's he and all this? And I think I've said this before. He certainly doesn't appear to be that sort of barnstorming leader that we require either. And I think this
No.
is probably the challenge where we said we needed to break the cycle, and it just feels like the cycle's beginning to kind of go again. And we just, I think as a fan base, we all don't want that to continue.
No, I think you're absolutely spot on. Well, folks, that was a wide-ranging discussion today, which probably is a reflection on the match yesterday, but I enjoyed it, and I hope that you did. If you want more from Heart and Hand, you really should, because the quality is immense. You can get it if you go to patreon.com/Heart and Hand, or you can go to YouTube, where you'll get those podcasts as well, as if you join our membership, starting at just $1.99. Right then, I'd like to thank our producers in London, Mightley and Paul Miles, and to my two guests today. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Cheers,
today,
Davey.
Cheers,
Alan. Cheers, listeners. I was going to say it's a positive week for Rangers, but of course it is. It's international break, so let's enjoy.
And that's a thing we've got to change. And to Alan Bradley.
No, thanks, David. Thanks, Big David. It was good. I'm getting back into the land of confusion again. And as you know, we're on the record now. We're going to win everything. That's it.
Yeah, the only one I know is Invisible Touch.
Oh, so, okay. That was Fairly Curtis in the box.
Well, listen, yeah. I'm going to watch Oasis tonight. I'll just say it now. I'm over. Yes, I'm going to see Oasis tonight in the MetLife Arena or MetLife Stadium. So, right. Don't start.
Celtic
funny, I was going to suggest when I get my own show to talk about Oasis, but that might have to go through the go through the policy unit. Yes, the policy,
the vetting. I've been absolutely incredibly disappointed that some of the staunchest members of Heart and Hand all travelling to watch. But what can you do? Me and Alan, we'll just stick to our old Andy Cameron DVDs and
absolutely, mate. They'll follow LP and that. Yeah.
That's it. And a nice 70s record. Right then, folks. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week. Until then, bye for now.